Hey, how's it going? So, I am terminally online, clearly. I think I have shown that if you have watched this for any period of time, but even if you haven't, I think just listening to a couple minutes of any video will pretty clearly show that. And I was driving around with a friend the other day. We were talking about high school and old drama, reminiscing about old friends or enemies, people that maybe we don't think of very fondly of, or like, oh, hey, what's this guy up to? That type of thing. And he made a comment that really, he sort of made me laugh, but was also fucking with me, but was also true. And that was, most people reminisce about high school and stuff like that. But for me, I'm thinking about old Xbox Live friendships, old messages I would have with people on Skype or Discord friend groups. And well, yes, it was funny at the time. It really did get me to think about a lot of things, but mainly this notion of the internet and reality. I think 2020, I had a little bit of a realization. I was stuck inside just like everybody else. There was COVID, the protests. I was having a bunch of my own, very troubling personal drama, whatever, going on at the time. And I was just miserable. It was probably the worst year of my life. I think 2019 and through to 2021 was the worst years of my life, bar none. And a lot of that was because of stuff online. And I remember in 2020, I would spend weeks inside just consuming news and getting so consumed into arguments with people online. But then I would have these moments where I would go hang out with people from school. We would meet up and I would leave the house and everything would be normal. And that was one of the first times I realized that reality and the internet are very different. But I think that's something that everyone kind of knows, right? I remember when I would vent to people and I would sometimes hear people say like, why don't you just turn the screen off? That would piss me off and still does so much because it is just such an ignorant and disrespectful, maybe even thing to say. Because, when it comes to mental health in general, everything is relative. And yes, sure, just turn off the screen, right? And I guess technically that stops the immediate effects of online drama or whatever you want to call it. But it still follows you and it still means something to you. And when I say you, I'm talking about me, people that I had never met in real life, but I had spent almost a decade of my life building relationships with. That doesn't just go away because I turn off the screen. And I think this is an issue that's growing and growing more and more as we become reliant on the internet. And this is nothing new. I think this is something that is a problem that I think we need to focus on as, virtual relationships, whatever you want to call it, become just the norm. I had a thought the other day. I used to date people online, and I don't mean e-dating. I don't mean Tinder or Hinge, whatever. I don't mean just meeting people online and stuff like that. I'm talking about Xbox Live. I'm talking about Skype. Back before it was so easy to use something like Discord and become essentially just normal friends with people. That isn't to degrade people that have online relationships. Two of my best friends that I've known for over a decade are people I've never met in real life before, but they mean more to me than most of my family. But I think, the last generation of people that grew up in that version of the internet where having online best friends or online relationships was taboo, was a little weird. I remember my parents or people in the media would make comments about how, oh, people online aren't your real friends. And I always get so upset about it. But this is all just sort of to point out how normalized it has become now. And I'm just one of those people who was sort of one of the last choppers out of Vietnam or whatever you want to call it. I was sort of one of the last people that experienced that weirder, older, more segmented version of the internet. But I'm in this shit, dude. Even now where I have grown so much, I've changed so much, the internet is still everything to me. Like, really, it is. I go to work every day. I'm in school. I have a life now. Maybe that's something I couldn't have said a couple years ago, maybe even two or 3 years ago. But I still find myself getting caught up in arguments online, for example. Something like Twitter is a cesspool. And sort of like in 2020, I get caught up in like, is this what people are like nowadays? Like, why is everyone just so fucking miserable? Like, actually, what the hell is going on, man? But then I will leave my house, I'll go to work, I'll talk to people in school, I'll actually interact with people outside. And I have never met people that are like this hyperbolic version that we see online in person. Yes, I've met weirdos, and obviously they exist somewhere out there, but the majority of people that I've met aren't like this. And it really makes me think, why do I still, after over a decade of getting caught up in these types of meaningless conversations and maybe even parasocial relationships, why do I still get caught up in a lot of this stuff? If I have verifiable proof that when I leave my house and interact with people in the real world, people that can actually affect my life, nobody is like this. I think it has to do a lot of how the internet has sort of creates this barrier of animosity, right? You read a tweet, for example, and at least for me, I always read it in the most uncharitable way. I am never reading it in like a nice, positive way. I mean, that's very rare, but even in comments I get on my videos where someone may be just saying something normally or pointing something out, but I will read it as an attack immediately. And I would imagine that is very common. And this layer between people, and I don't know how this was created, I don't know why this exists, but it makes the world seem so much meaner, so much harsher, so much more dystopian than maybe it really is. And I think it only gets worse as the world gets worse. I think it's no secret that a lot of people are suffering right now, and that's obviously always going to be the case. But I think, at least in America, shit kind of sucks for a lot of people right now. And I think as that continues, people flock to whatever they can to escape. And nowadays, I think for the majority of the people, that is the internet. That is going on to maybe not forums, but like, your Twitters, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, YouTubes, whatever it may be. I actually just recently reinstalled Instagram just to sort of check out and be like, what's going on over here? Maybe see if I got any messages. I literally have not used this thing in years. And I'll see posts from people that I know in person, that I know in real life, and I will get upset looking at their posts being like, are they just showing off? Are they doing this or that? And like, dude, I know these people. Why do I think like this? Now, I have my own litany of issues. I've been vocal about my anger issues. I've talked a lot about that kind of stuff. I'm sure most of you guys haven't seen that, but it's some of the first things I ever talked about. One of the first videos I ever did was talking about my depression and anger issues and stuff like that, and how social media festers that environment. These algorithms want you to stay miserable because it keeps you engaged. Arguing with people in comment sections is how those guys make money. It gets their metrics up. It gets you seeing more ads. And I think that is definitely a lot of the driving factor behind a lot of this. But I think we need to start having conversations, especially with young people who are growing up in a world where they don't know what life was like without the iPhone. Like I was saying earlier, I was one of the first generations, I was one of the last generations, rather, to, experience things like Skype, Xbox Live without Discord. Obviously, Xbox Live and PSN still exist, but usually you're meeting people on there, and then you're taking that out of that ecosystem. You're following them on all their social media and stuff like that. I didn't have that for a long time. For me, it was just, I hope he gets online today so we can talk. I've joked before with friends that, we have the sex talk with children. We have a lot of these conversations, with our kids about safety and hey, by the way, when you grow up, you're going to have to deal with this and you're going to have to worry about, watch out for this or whatever. I've joked before about am I going to have the internet talk with my kids? Because it's going to be inevitable that this will be a large portion of their life. And I think maybe even schools need to step in and start teaching people this is just how the world is, man. Kids are getting iPhones, they're getting iPads, they're spending hours on Roblox and stuff like that. And I am not a boomer, I am not fear-mongering. This is just how the world is, right? It's so easy to be, maybe a little bit of an older person, maybe someone even my age, and be like, oh, the world is going to shit. We're going to start falling apart because kids are playing Roblox. I'm not saying that. But this is just the world we live in, and I think we need to adapt to that, right? I think a lot of the old, maybe anti-bullying campaigns, those don't work anymore, man, and they're not gonna. I don't think they even worked back then when I'm assuming even you, were seeing them plastered all over your middle school. And I think I've gone on such a large tangent, but I don't know. I've just been thinking about when I leave my house, no one I meet is like how they are online. No one is this angry. No one holds this amount of animosity for each other. And obviously that exists. And obviously this is just my own personal experience. But even in the world of politics, which I think is the most divisive, the most, miserable place to be in, I've been to polling places. I have been in clubs for politics. I've talked to so many people online, and while yes, it gets heated, it's just not how it is online. Just the level of anger that I think a lot of that anonymity, maybe that's what it is, creates. I don't know, man. It just doesn't feel good to me. And I think that if you're someone who is like relating to a lot of what I'm saying, and you're maybe a little bit of a basement dweller, like I used to be, in some cases still am. I don't know. I think it feels like it's rotting my brain a little bit. And having those moments where I'm just talking to like the cashier or a waiter, can completely flip and change my perspective in that moment. And I think that's really important. I think human interaction, as cliche as it is really important. It is something that matters. And I think we, as a society, are struggling with becoming more and more segmented or separated, put into our own little boxes from algorithms or at our work, whatever it may be. And I think it's really dangerous. And I think it's important for people to be aware of that. I think there are systemic issues. Obviously, I think these companies need to be regulated and put a little bit under the microscope. Be like, hey, this shit's a little predatory, don't you think? I've actually been thinking about making a video on like a lot of the gambling stuff for a while now, but CoffeeZilla just put out a video which sort of reinvigorated that. So I might do that, but I feel like I'm just going to be parroting a lot of what he said. But yeah, I don't know. That's going to be it for today's video. I got Twitter and stuff in the description. I got a second channel where I talk about video games. Yeah, see you guys.